All right. Well, let's kick it off. It's a great pleasure to host this unfiltered conversation with Amr Salahieh. All of you have heard about Amr through us. Some of you have spoken with him. Some of you have met him. I'm just going to say a couple of words about him. Amr is a seasoned medical device entrepreneur. He's got more than 30 years of healthcare experience. Of course, he's the founder and CEO of Shifamed, the medical innovation hub headquartered in the Silicon Valley. He's got 6 successful exits under his belt. And Amr and his team at Shifamed have raised together over the years close to $1 billion for its portfolio companies. Very happy, of course, to host this conversation together. The format really is going to be a Q&A, hopefully as unfiltered as we can. So Amr, feel free, to tell the truth as it is. I'll be moderating, and the conversation will really have 4 parts. The first part, we've got Amr, so we've got to ask him to describe the Shifamed part, right? And that will last about 5 minutes, and then we'll dive into the forward-looking part where we're going to look at the current market conditions. Part 3, we're going to talk about how to deliver exits, and then part 4 and 5, Q&A and conclusion. So I guess, let's dive straight in, Amr. Can we please ask you to describe, in 5 minutes or so, with your own words as the founder, what Shifamed does, please?
Sure. Shifamed is good morning, everybody, or good evening for all of you in Europe, probably, most of you. So Shifamed is a venture studio for medical device startups. A venture studio implies that we initiate and start these companies and really manage the process and the companies, operate them all the way until we exit. So that's the difference between that and an incubator. An incubator implies that you're working on these companies for a period of time and then they just go off on their own. Our model is a little bit different. We have one campus. All the companies are on that one campus. Each company has its own facility. As they mature, get big enough where they need that growth. And we operate the companies, fundraise for them, hire for them, and then ultimately are fundraising and working with strategics for corporate takeout. So that's what we do at Shifamed. We're focused exclusively on medical devices, and even more sort of focus around cardiovascular technologies. So a lot of the times our products are minimally invasive products or implants to be used by interventional cardiologists or electrophysiologists. That's a big majority of the activities we've had in the past, and we continue to do. That's what we do. We're about 250, 300 people, 7 companies in the Bay Area here. And our goal is to always identify the next opportunity, drive forward progress, and drive an exit. I think that's the quick overview.
Perfect. Thanks for this summary, Amr. Well, let's jump in, the current market conditions. Can you tell us at a high level, Amr, what are you seeing in the market right now? What are the challenges that we're facing?
I would say our model and our industry has shifted a little bit, depending who you're speaking with, shifted a lot. Innovation is still coming from startups. That's not changed. The large companies are acquiring the smaller companies. The middle-sized companies have been all acquired, or at least mostly so. The ones that were aspiring to be bigger, companies like NRA, companies like Abiomed and Shockwave that were growing, they became target and then eventually got acquired by the larger corporations. So that trend continues, except that it's shifted a little bit. The larger companies are acquiring later in the cycle. They're really looking for companies they can tuck into their current existing distribution network. So, and they really want to buy close to commercialization. They sort of mitigate the P&L loss. When they acquire, they get it from the balance sheet. And they're avoiding paying, interest rates, right? So higher interest rates post-COVID has shifted, money is not free anymore. And the companies are willing to acquire, and they still acquire. They're acquiring later and happier to pay more money, which is good for those companies that are sort of in this early commercialization phase, or can fit very nicely into a distribution network that already exists within the strategic. It's just harder for the earlier companies, because if they were hoping to exit it with just a handful of patients treated without any kind of approval, with no infrastructure, or very far from commercialization, and that's become more difficult. There's always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, now the trend is more mature companies and higher takeout, but it also means a longer cycle, more money to be raised, and so forth. That I would say is sort of probably the most significant change since post-COVID.
Excellent. Can you maybe, give us an example, taking, for example, Supera, as a case study of how we addressed this?
Yeah, so it's not very complicated. Last time when we were essentially fundraising, we got close to a potential takeout or a structured transaction, and ultimately didn't take place. I think the strategic is still a little bit wary of buying too early, and investing dollars post-transaction, which is going to hit the P&L. So even though we got close, and we managed to convert that interest from the strategics into investments from two of them, and that are on a cap table. So what we ended up doing is raising a lot more money, raising enough money to take us through the full FDA approval cycle, or very close to that, which is what the company is doing. So this is, for us, certainly the next step forward in the evolution of what we do at Shifamed. Many of our companies now, I would say, are going to take it all the way through to that point and start commercialization before the transactions take place. So that's happened for Supera. We raised $120 million. We raised it from Novo. They were the lead investor. They happened to be the lead investor for one of our main competitors. But we were happy to get their money. They gave us a good valuation, and they really understand the space. Also, other investors came, like QIA, and like I mentioned, the two strategics. So raising that and creating a syndicate that's that strong. Nova is one of the largest private sort of investors in our industry. QIA, Qatar Investment Authority, is one of the large sovereign wealth funds from Qatar, obviously. And the other two strategics and other investors and insiders. That kind of a syndicate allows us to do two things. One, enough money to complete significant milestones and really get either into commercial stage or very much right at the cusp of it. But also the ability to keep doing more if needed. Now, the advantage is that the takeout and the expectation for a transaction is going to be higher, because you've put more energy into it, you've built more, you're further advanced, you're closer to generating revenue, so you're going to be immediately creative to the acquiring companies. And so that's what we did. And it took a long time, of course, as these larger financings are just more time consuming. There's a lot more considerations, a lot more parties to the table. So things do take longer, but ultimately, it sets up the company for success. You have 2.5 years, 3 years of runway to really accomplish what needs to happen, and enough buffer to deal with any kind of unseen circumstances and schedule changes and so on. And that's really what transpired for Supera. And it's been a great sort of success for Supera, because right now we've been able to show the world that really we're, one of the best, if not, the best. I mean, it's really depends who's looking at it. From my perspective, we are the most interesting asset in the category. It's allowed us to really engage with the strategic, the ones on our cap table, but the other ones as well. We've made a lot of clinical sort of progress, both on the high-risk PCI sort of indication, as well as the cardiogenic shock indication. We've treated some patients recently outside the US for this indication. We're very happy with the progress. We have a next generation technology moving forward rapidly. And we just got approval to start our pivotal study that's taking place in the US for the high-risk PCI indication. This is a randomized study against standard of care, mostly the Impella CP product. And we will randomize against that product that's on the market, and the only product that's on the market right now in a very significant sector of our industry. We will start our clinical study literally any minute now. There's a number of sites that are trying to be the first one to treat the patients in their hospital with our device, to be the first to start our randomized clinical study. And that should be, finished enrollment in sort of early next year, and really set us up for the next level of success. Submitting all the information to the FDA so that it starts to reviewing that process while we're negotiating our next step forward, be it a financing or a transaction and so forth. So that's kind of what's going on with Supera. Big effort, big success. It really puts us in a place where it's hard to look at what's happening and where we are and not see the value and recognize it.
Wow. Probably the jewel in the crown. Another company doing great is Accura. Do you mind taking us through a similar update on Accura, please?
Sure. So Accura is also in a similar place. It's a different space. This is obviously a thrombectomy company that's removing blood clot from the lungs. And as we looked at the landscape and came up with our technology using these water jets to break up the clot to remove it more efficaciously, and reducing sort of the delivery challenges, we identified the fact that there's a number of competitors trying to do very sort of simple, basic, straightforward catheter development. And it started to cloud sort of the separation between what we're doing in our catheter design versus others. So we really pushed forward and tried to explore other ways to solve problems that are really critical for the physicians and their patients for this procedure. And we identified this idea that, this is still a evolving procedure. A lot of physicians don't treat the patients. These are emergency procedures. So the physicians can't really stack patients in one day or a couple of days. They just happen at any time of the day and night, and they have to treat the patients, sort of an emergency scenario within hours sometimes. And so that presents a different set of challenges for the technology that's to be developed, the relationships that's needed. And so, given the early nature of these procedures, there's just not a lot of understanding and tools that help the physicians treat these patients. And so there was a reluctance for a lot of sites about treating those patients, given what we just described, the emergency nature and lack of experience typically. And so beyond just the catheters, we decided and explored and really of getting a lot of success using digital tools. So we leveraged some of the skills that we've developed, core technologies at Shifamed that really were initiated at Laza Medical. And we'll talk about that company in a bit. But we took that learning and applied it in the case of thrombectomy and created 3D reconstruction of the lungs. And this 3D reconstruction of the lungs, we take the CT data, apply it, and now during the case, and actually I can show you a couple of quick videos. Let's see here if we can get it right. You can see the anatomy is very complicated. So often they can be in one branch and mistake themselves to be in the right one when they could be in the wrong one because they overlap each other.
Amr, I think your videos won't show from where you are. Apologies for that, but please continue.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, then I'll. It's not showing, huh?
If you want, you can send it to me, and we can show it from here. Yeah, that's part of the webinar. Setup here.
I see.
But
okay, so I will just keep moving forward. So what we've done instead is created that 3D reconstruction of the lungs which then allows the physicians to see where they are and synchronize that 3D model with the fluoro. So as they move the fluoro around, they can actually see the different angles and make sure that they're really projecting and creating the view that allows them to make sure that they're in the right branch, as simple as that. And then as we move forward, showing how far they are from the clot, where's the tip of the catheter relative to the clot, so they aspirate the clot as opposed to aspirate a blood. And then also see how the clot is evolving during the procedure. Where is it? Has it been aspirated? Is it still there, not there? There's a number of things that we've realized that is something desired by the physicians in terms of doing the procedure and guiding the procedure, where the clot is, how far it is, and the obstruction that each clot is, which one to target, which one's not to target, and also physiological measures, pressure measurements. So a variety of tools that are really critical that only because of machine learning and AI, we've been able to quickly adapt and synchronize this 3D model with what's going on live from the fluoro image and updating that instantaneously in real time. And that's really allowed them to understand what's going on. It's not just about the catheter, but it's also about all these other things to know, when do I terminate the procedure? Am I in the right place, and so forth. So we're the only company that's pushing forward in this digital platform to accompany the catheters. And then some of the features of the system will be really closely tied to our catheter. So it gives us a lot of advantages in terms of how we tackle this market. With the software at the beginning, we can go to all our sites, any site, even a competitor site, get them to use the software, develop a relationship with these physicians, and then ultimately convert them to be using our catheters. So it's a very helpful way to create a strong set of customers, even though they may originally be working with our competitors. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken, and we are unique to do this, and that's really allowing us to differentiate ourselves and really engage with the community in a way that was not possible when we have 6, 7 different companies doing catheters, a variety of different ones for the same procedure. Now we stand out. This technology is evolving, and we need physician feedback, and they're really happy to sort of participate in this. So we've had a really enthusiastic embrace from the community to participate in this endeavor to really create the next generation tools to treat the patients with the knowledge of what's going on, with the diagnostics and the guidance and navigation during the procedure. So that's really what we've done. And this has allowed us to also fundraise. So we raised a large amount of money, about $50 million, where the Qatar Investment Authority, again, was a lead investor in this case, and allowed us to raise money to go to the next stage. And part of this is, next generation catheters, clinical study for the pulmonary embolism indication in the US that's ongoing for us. And then a lot of other features like blood return and so on. So a lot of activity for this company. The funding that's been that we're able to raise because of the differentiated solution that we have is allowing us to move forward with a complete system solution for the physicians and their patients, from the catheter, the console, the pump to aspirate the blood return system, the software navigation of the catheter and the clot, and so on. So that's really what's taking place at Accura. And part of this is actually we're creating a facility in Qatar to keep moving forward progress as part of this. So there's a subsidiary that's being set up there to support the activities, as well as the US headquarters. So that's sort of the overview for Accura and what's going on there. And it's a very similar sort of pattern that we did with Supera. We ended up raising a larger amount of money, building a lot more value, and really looking for a much better exit than otherwise.
Excellent, Amr. Now, let's move on, if you allow, to Laser Medical. And by the way, I have here 2 videos, short, the robot and the 3D reconstruction image. So let us know when you want us to play them, if you want us to play them. But if you could give us a short description as well.
Yeah. I'll short the script, as you can play it anytime. So
Perfect.
LASA is really a next generation imaging solution for interventional cardiology when you have to work in the chambers of the heart. And so when I say you're treating patients in the chambers of the heart, these are procedures that are called structural heart procedures. So these are procedures to treat valves, left atrial appendage closure procedures, PFA, AFib treatments, and so forth. And where you're working in the chambers of the heart, so often you have to use a TE probe that's inserted by the physician. These are standard probes. Um, and then we put them in the robot, and then the robot will automatically navigate the probe to where it needs to be in the anatomy. And this is something that today is a very tedious process where the physician has to hold the probe continuously for multiple, for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes. And so it's sort of, it's physically draining, but also intellectually very challenging because they're looking typically at 2D slices and recreating that 2D slices as a 3D model in their brain and orienting the probe to show the physicians what needs to happen. But not everybody can do this. Not everybody has that kind of skill set. And this role and position is not very sought after because they don't get paid that much and they're very close to the fluoro and they get exposed to a lot of fluoro X-ray radiation, which is certainly something they don't like to do. And it's just physically and mentally draining. There's a lot of manipulation has to take place on the console, moving things around, labeling things, putting planes and so forth. And what our system is, it does away with all of these things. After they insert the probe, they automatically scan the heart. The system creates a 3D reconstruction of the heart within seconds, and it keeps it updated live, 10, 20 times a second. So it's a real-time reproduction of the anatomy, just purely based on the ultrasound. And this is also, again, only possible because of machine learning. We took a lot of data of CT, ultrasound, and otherwise trained our model and created a sort of a digital twin of that patient on the fly that allows the robot to navigate to the different views that are needed very quickly, very effectively back and forth. When often some of the physicians, sometimes they can't remember exactly where they were and what it was, and there's a long conversation between them and an interventionist. Yeah, this is what we're looking at. We're in the right spot, and so forth. This one gives them a full context view of what they're looking at, so they always know where they are, and it can keep certain elements and anatomy essentially consistent and not moving, stabilized, even if the probe is moving, even if you turn off the probe. The system knows the anatomy and recognizes it. So if you label something on the heart, it will stay there, even if the heart is moving. So if you label where the transeptal puncture location there is, even if you move the probe or turn off the probe, and you turn it back on and you show the model, it'll be there, and they can see it. It allows you to stabilize certain images. You can say, hey, stabilize this view, this left atrial appendage. It will keep it stable because it recognizes and understands anatomy, which is really novel and unique to this technology. So it solves the mental challenge and burden of having to move things around. Every time today when they do a procedure, if they move the probe, all the access and all the positions and all the planes they've created are sort of off. They have to be redone. The system, if it understands anatomy like ours, it keeps them steady and understand that we want this plane to be perpendicular to this anatomy, and it'll keep it there regardless of what's going on in the procedure. It can show it to you continuously. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to do. So that mental challenge of looking at things, interpreting it, the tedious thing of holding the probe continuously is gone. So is the manipulation and tuning and settings of the ultrasound machine. The zoom, the frequency, the cropping that you have to do is all automated because the system understands anatomy, understands which procedure you're doing and what step of the procedure you are performing. So it can walk you through a workflow. So the device companies will be able to put workflows specific and dedicated to their devices, to their particular catheter or implant. And that's really powerful for those companies because then they can instill best practices for these procedures, which is really fundamental and really important. Without good visualization, you're not going to have a good procedure. Interventional cardiologists, even if they're fantastic and the best of the world, with a poor image, they just don't have as good of an outcome. And everybody knows that. And the challenge is in our healthcare industry, there's just not enough people to do all the things that need to be done. And specifically, not enough interventional cardiologists. And even more so, there's just not enough echocardiologists, which are interventional cardiologists who have been trained to do echo. So they are, very specialized people, and there's very few people doing it. So in the US, even smaller hospitals can't afford to have these folks. And so they don't do certain procedures. And often they don't get paid. They pay $200 for, to do one procedure that can last 3 hours. Whereas if they were to do their normal work, annotate and do reports for various imaging and so forth, they would be generating 10 times that revenue. So we're solving a problem of throughput, efficiency, consistency, quality for the whole community with this technology. Again, here we're leaders. We're the first ones to do this. We're very excited about this technology and this company. And we've been supported with GE as an investor on the cap table. We're contemplating right now a structured financing. We're in the final negotiations of this large financing that basically finances the company all the way through an exit. And sort of we're negotiating the terms of that exit right now. We're in the final sort of stage of this back and forth between us and the strategic, and we're very excited. Now, in this financing, we're going to have more than one strategic, two of them. One is an imaging strategic corporate, and then one of them is a device strategic that have the devices. And they're both interested and they're both going to be part of this. One of them is going to be the acquirer. The other one is investing because they want to make sure they have access to the technology. So very interesting, very compelling. I think the physicians who have seen what we can do and what we're doing all recognize that this is the future. All ultrasound procedures will be done this way. And we're really glad to be the ones, fortunate enough to be the first ones to bring it to the market.
That's great. Thank you for this impressive summary, Amr. We know from what you've just described, with these three very successful company, right, that capital raise has been really hard, right? And there's one challenging situation. If I could ask you to tell us a couple of sentences about Accura Medical, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think this occurs in a situation where we developed a product, got into the clinic, had really great results, and recently been published in a number of conferences. Just the timing of when we ran out of money and when we were raising money was difficult, and we could not raise the amount of money that's required. These days, it's hard to raise money when you tell people we still need $150 million in 4 years or 5 years before we get approval and commercialization. When people can go and invest in AI-based companies that may have even a more appealing outcome. And so we're competing in a scenario. If you don't have a return fast, it's sometimes super challenging to move forward. And so we put the company on ice for now, but we're having conversations with potential investors, strategics that are really interested in technology, and we hope to revive it. But in the meantime, we stopped the burn and identifying a partner that allows us to sort of fund it, move it forward, get into the clinic, because it's a very large market. I think just the hurdle and the environment right now are not favoring investments that are significant that have a long hold period. And especially in ophthalmology, it's a more difficult space. There's less acquiring companies. And so when you have less acquiring companies, it's not as easy to fundraise for those types of projects. But we do hope and expect that at some point in time things will change, and at that point in time we'll move forward with the technology and get into because we did get approval to start a pivotal study in the U.S. Which is a huge achievement on behalf of the team. And so we hope that at some point in time when we identify the right partners, that we could do a structural financing similar to what we talked about with Laza, that really allows us to move it forward and ultimately get the product in the market and have an exit for our investors.
Okay, thank you, Amr, for that. And one of the more challenging situations, I imagine, that affects us, in Fund One. But thank you for this description. Good. Let's move now, to the second part, and there, hopefully forward-looking about, how to deliver exits, right? In general, Amr, for companies like Supera, for Accura, or any other, companies in our portfolio, right? What do we need to do to deliver exits?
I think what we need to do is really get these products closer and closer to commercialization. That's what you need to be differentiated. You need to really address a growing and fundamental market for the large companies. And what you need to do is raise enough money to get to that commercialization. So what we're trying to accomplish is really create a large enough syndicate and investors and raise enough money to take it all the way through, not hope and expect that you get taken out early. You have to really prepare for the long haul and really fund the company and the strategy to enable that. If you just think short term, there's just too risky and not really the appropriate way to do things. So in order to solve this, either we go and find large investors that are interested in the specific technology or a company, or and we're pushing more in this direction now than we have in the past, is really establish the relationship with the partner that's ultimately going to be the acquirer. Do this really early, have them be part of a syndicate that allows us to fundraise, arguably do a structured financing or a build to buy. And this means that the investor is the strategic with other investors likely. They will put in money, and the arrangement is that after certain milestone, they acquire the company. So this is an earlier investment from the strategics. And because it's an investment, they don't own it. It doesn't hit the P&L, so it comes from the balance sheet as long as they don't own too large of a percentage of the company, so they avoid consolidation of their accounting. So those are the kinds of things you do. So you do a financing as long as it's some below a certain percentage threshold holdings. And there are certain things like notes that you can do that help you through this process. But you create that relationship, you create the conditions, you understand what they need, you understand the deliverables, we agree on that, we negotiate that, the financing takes place, then you move forward with the technology development, get into the clinic, and following those milestones that have been predetermined, there's an exit that takes place that's also predetermined. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to do. I mean, this is what we're moving forward with the companies that are remaining. So we're having these kinds of conversations with potential sort of partners. So we're doing this for Adana Medical. We're pushing in this direction. Meyer already has a strategic that's invested, and they're in that process. Same thing that we did with Laza. But we're also going to do this. We're looking to do similar things for Tioga, which is our mitral valve company, where we're doing sort of applying both sort of solutions in our portfolio. So going in the direction of digital robotics for mitral valve replacement, but also identifying a partner in that process as well. So those are the lessons for us as we move forward. What's worked for us is these relationships with the strategics earlier, the build to buys, but also going in the direction of AI machine learning to be an important factor. So in the forms of robotics, imaging, image processing, so that you enable a product that may have been difficult to use or more challenging to learn. Now you reduce that barrier, you improve quality and consistency, and allow these treatments to be more widespread, what they call more democratized. So many physicians, even if they're less skilled or have treated less patients, they can have the same outcome as a more experienced physician because the tools are really facilitating the task and making it more consistent. And so those are the areas where we want to go. And often robotics and imaging are very helpful because they leverage a less burdensome way from an FDA perspective. The typical implant where you have to have follow-up, randomization, and so forth. Robotics usually does not need randomization. And the burden from an FDA perspective is really about technical in nature, not necessarily about the outcome. And so when you can layer on robotics and imaging, you can really scale an approval or a procedure that already exists, take it to the next level with a less burdensome regulatory pathway. And so those are the two areas that we're sort of moving forward with as ways to sort of address the current sort of changing environment in medtech.
Amr, I'd like, and you described it already quite a bit, but there's one space that's been incredibly active, the mechanical catheter-based blood clot removal space with Stryker taking over Inari, a bit more than a year ago, and now Boston Scientific taking over Penumbra, both pretty big amounts. Obviously, we've got Accura in that space. How can we make, Accura attractive, in the light of this big activity in capital markets?
So I think what we're doing, as I described earlier, is the solution that is so compelling and needed that it becomes essential in the treatment of the patients. And that's for us, is this ability to understand what you're doing and guide the procedure using these digital tools, imaging, navigation, and linking the catheter to the digital sort of world on your screen as you're pushing it forward, identifying the clot, understanding what the patient is doing in a way that you didn't have before. So, and those tools, when people start using them and realize the value and benefit they have, and they become part of the standard practice, that changes the equation. They become fundamental as far as the procedure goes, and the physician relies on these tools. This has happened before in the past. I would say one of the really successful examples of this that J&J Bioscience Webster established is Cardo. Cardo is a navigation system for electrophysiology. And that really enabled him to create a full ecosystem of not just the software, but also the variety of different catheters that work well within that environment. And that made him basically the fundamental company in that space for a long time, until recently with Boston putting the PFA product and Medtronic doing their own PFA and others doing PFA. But even now with the PFA world, even though J&J's PFA offerings, I would say, not as competitive or not as dominant as the Boston product, they still are growing their franchise in electrophysiology, thanks because of that to the Cardo solution, that software that everybody got used to, everybody got trained on, and they continue to improve it, and it's essential for the procedure. But because they have that tool, and because they link it to their catheters, they train everybody on it, and their physicians and the reps of the company do such a good job with it. That's allowed them to maintain a market share and grow market in that space. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish here at Accura in a similar way. We want to establish Accura, the software tool, what we call NavIQ, to be the dominant sort of useful tool, because first of all, it's the only one, and it's really providing things that the physicians are needing and are looking forward to using. So once people start using that tool and pay for it, and then they sort of start linking some of the features that are advanced from that software related to the catheter that we have, that's when we really start commanding attention and market share in this space, and really differentiate ourselves from everybody else. So what we're hoping is then everybody pays attention. The current existing players, the big ones, and then also other big ones that don't have currently an offering in that space.
Great. So basically, adding imaging, adding AI, adding navigation, these are the strategic aspects. When we look, at the more like tactical aspect at the company's level, is there anything that you do differently? I'm thinking reducing costs or so, since, the run, we need more money for longer, anything that you could describe us, to understand that refocus?
Yeah, I mean, it's for the companies that are really, on the way to commercialization, we push very hard to go and do large scale production, leveraging what we've done, and start going into places for production in lower labor countries or areas. So we're definitely doing that right now for some of our companies. And then the ones that are too early, where they don't really need large production facilities, we consolidate and reduce the sort of the footprint. So we take advantage of the footprint when we need it, but we also expand quickly to a larger scale, a lower cost. And then for the companies that are earlier stage, we consolidate and have them share a little bit more until such time they need to have their own facility. So we're just adjusting based on expectations and you know, updated plans for each of the companies.
Perfect. Let's jump in the Q&A part, if you allow me. Anyone, of course, participating can post a question, you know, in the system, and I'll see it on my screen, and I'll pass it on. There's already a couple that came up. Amr, I'll have to put you under the spotlight. The first question is, what is the timing for the exit on Supera in your view?
Well, I'll tell you what we're telling everybody, and there's no way for us to forecast exactly what happens and when, but what we're telling investors and strategics is that, look, by the sort of towards November timeframe, we need to know who's interested and in what, because we have money through the end of next year, and we're going to start putting plans together, you know, a year in advance. And that gives us the opportunity for people to step up, say, we're interested here, we want to do a transaction, or we want to do a structured financing, or we're not interested at all. And so we're going to essentially, everybody's preparing their decision. So by that November timeframe, we will know who's essentially part of that process, so that they essentially compete for the next step, the next financing, or the next transaction. And that's really what we're trying to do. We have enough. This is the advantage of the large financing that we did earlier, that we executed. It is allowing us to finish our clinical study, but also engage in a very, let's call it, comfortable way with strategics without being stressed, and in the best position possible to create a competitive process, a bidding process. For the next evolution of Supera Medical, whatever it turns out to be. So that's really what's going to happen. So if we start that conversation in November, we expect certain decisions to be made within months from that, you know, 3 months, 6 months, something like that.
Okay, great. After Supera, what would be the next company that we should have in mind for an exit?
Well, Laza, because that one is sort of predetermined. That the conversation that we're having is really about the fine tuning now. We're finalizing terms. The financing is going to be somewhere in the range of $157 million, most of it coming from the one strategic and another strategic. It's tranched in a couple of different ways. Once we hit our milestones, they're going to have to transact, or they lose their rights. Either way, it's going to be a great outcome for us, because if they transact as intended. If they don't, we're going to get a chance to sell it at a higher level. So that is really the next one that we can sort of discuss in a way that's meaningful. And that's going to be in the 2028, 2029 timeframe.
Cool. Amr, I've got a couple of other questions, and you know, we're running a little bit out of time. So if I can ask you maybe to answer quick, how is AI affecting our portfolio companies?
So AI has really become, I would say, if we can use AI to augment and improve what we can do, we have to do it, and we have to do it faster than our competitors. Because if we don't, we're going to miss out. We're going to not maximize opportunity. And so it's already had made a huge difference to 3 of our companies. You know, Laza doesn't exist without AI and machine learning. The company wouldn't even have started without it, because that's really what it's based on. Accura's navigation solution, taking advantage of AI and machine learning, has really saved the company. Without it, I think we would have trouble fundraising or fundraising in a significant way. And then Taiga Medical, we're going to do robotics to facilitate some of those activities, some of those steps in the procedure. And that's again, I think it would be less interesting without it, and more difficult as a procedure, harder to scale. So, the AI and machine learning, when you can apply it, you're going to be failing any mission if it's available to you and you don't take advantage of it. So we were lucky enough to have started some of these activities early enough, and so we are leaders in a couple of areas, and we'll continue to push in this direction, take advantage of these tools. Like I said, what I really appreciate about these tools is that generally speaking, the regulatory burden for these is less than the typical standard traditional implant, let's say, or procedure that requires a lot of follow-up and randomization. Because the clinical aspect of the procedure is mostly governed by the product, which is the invasive part, or the implant, not so much the sophistication of the imaging or the tool that gives physician feedback. And that really is facilitating a task. And so it's really sitting on top of a foundation of more standard traditional regulatory clinical burden, and the robotics helps those things immensely.
Like one sentence answer, please. What keeps you awake at night?
Everything.
Thank you. Look, Amr, I want to take this opportunity to really thank you, not just for your time now, but I think everyone here understands, the immense amount of work that has come into raising these kind of sums of money and basically putting us, into this position, whether it's with Supera, whether it's with Laza, as we just discussed, this build to buy, et cetera, et cetera. I think, I want to be making that very vocal. Drawing a quick conclusion from my side, I think, when you look at Shifamed's portfolio companies, right, it's always been about risk mitigation. It's at the core of everything that Shifamed does. In particular, when it comes to, fast follower, avoiding, these situations that will take more time, but also, when you look at our portfolio, right, we have a clear positive selection bias. There is this situation in ophthalmology that is harder, and obviously, our portfolio is going to look to invest into the companies that show the best progress and the best opportunity, right? So there is this positive selection bias. Secondly, and almost lastly, right, I think, we all know that we had delays with exits, and I guess, currently Shifamed portfolio companies have never been closer to exits, with the names we just mentioned. So I guess, that really lines us up for delivering some quick exits. So looking forward to that. With that in mind, Fund 2 here on our side will conduct a second close after the summer with a planned closing date of September 30th. So yeah, we'll be lining up everything for that. Obviously, this is an important moment because that money flows into our portfolio companies to bring them to a successful exit. I guess we'll close it here. Amr, thank you so much for answering all our questions. All the participants, thank you so much for participating and for asking the questions. On our side, we'll be preparing a replay and we'll be sending it for all of you and also for those that were not able to attend or not able to attend till the end. Thank you so much and have a nice evening.